I was brushing my teeth when the text came in, 11:47 p.m., to be exact. You're closer, so you're watching the kids. My sister wrote like she was assigning a task to a coworker, not asking a massive favor. We're already on the way. Mom has your spare key. I just stared at the screen for a second, foam in my mouth, toothbrush dangling, trying to figure out if I was dreaming or if my 35-year-old sister had actually decided to dump her 5 children. Yes, 5. On me with a 12-minute warning. No request, no heads up, no please. Just a statement, a decision made, a life assumed to be available. That's how it always was with Mia. Assumptions, expectations, entitlement. I'm Jason, 33 years old, and I live alone in a small but cozy high-rise apartment in downtown Chicago. No pets, no roommates, no drama. Or at least, I used to be able to say that last part. I work remotely as a product manager for a tech firm, which apparently, to my family, translates into he's home all day doing nothing anyway. I've heard that line enough times at family dinners that I stopped correcting them. But this was something else entirely. Let me rewind a bit, because this mess didn't start at midnight with a text. It started years ago. Mia is my older sister by 2 years and has always acted like that gap made her my third parent. She's loud, confident, and fiercely controlling, especially when things aren't going her way. Growing up, she was the golden child, straight A's, captain of the soccer team, first to get married, first to pop out kids. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one, the introvert, the disappointment, apparently, because I chose a career over a family and moved into the city instead of staying close to home. Mia has 5 kids under the age of 10, a husband who's never around, and a habit of treating everyone else like her personal assistant. Babysitting, expected. Picking up groceries, my job. Showing up for every birthday party, recital, school event. If I missed one, I got a guilt trip from our mom. The kind of long, sigh-filled phone calls where she'd say things like, "You know she's under so much stress," or, "It would mean a lot to the kids if you showed up once in a while." As if I wasn't already working 60-hour weeks just to keep up with the madness at my job. The thing is, I used to do it all. I used to try. I'd rearrange my schedule, cancel plans, drive 40 minutes out to the suburbs just to sit on Mia's couch while her toddler threw blocks at my head, and she ran a quick errand that lasted 3 hours. I did it because I thought that's what family does. You show up. You help. You don't keep score. But Mia kept score. Not in the way you'd think. Not with fairness or appreciation. No, it was always about who owed her. If you helped once, it meant you were willing. If you were willing, it meant she could demand. And if you said no, suddenly you were selfish, ungrateful, a bad brother, a bad son. The breaking point, or at least the start of the unraveling, began 6 months ago at our cousin Alicia's wedding. I had flown in from a work conference just to attend. I was exhausted, jet-lagged, and had a client presentation the next day. But I still showed up, gift in hand, in a tailored suit, because Alicia and I were close. I barely got through the reception before Mia cornered me at the bar with that too-wide grin she used when she was about to ask for something big. "Hey, I need you to take the kids overnight next weekend. Me and Chris are doing a couple's retreat," she said, sipping a white wine like it was already a done deal. I blinked at her. "I've got a product launch that weekend." She waved a hand. "Just bring your laptop. You work from home, right?" "No, I work from home when I'm not launching software with $1 million budget on the line," I said, trying to laugh it off. But she wasn't amused. "Oh, come on. You're the only one who doesn't have responsibilities." I actually choked on my drink. "Mia, I have a job. A real one. With deadlines and people depending on me." She tilted her head, like she was looking at an alien. "You don't have real responsibilities. No spouse, no kids. It's not the same." And there it was. The assumption that my life was worth less because it didn't revolve around diaper bags and daycare drop-offs. That somehow, my career and my mental health were less important because I didn't have a car seat in the back of my sedan. I told her no that night. It was the first time I'd ever said no and stuck to it. I could see the shock in her eyes, the way her mouth twisted like I'd insulted her. She didn't argue, not then. But the passive-aggressive texts started almost immediately. Comments in the family group chat. Little digs from our mom about how Mia doesn't feel supported lately or needs help from her siblings, not judgment. My younger brother, Dean, lives out of state. He's married with 2 kids of his own, But Mia doesn't lay into him like she does with me. I think it's because she knows I'm the easier target. Or at least, I used to be. So when I saw that text at 11:47 p.m., I wasn't even surprised. Angry, sure, but not surprised. I hadn't agreed to anything. She hadn't called. I hadn't seen her in 2 weeks. But she decided, just decided, that I was going to babysit 5 children overnight while she and her husband went off somewhere. She didn't even say where. Just, we're already on the way. And the kicker? Mom has your spare key. That hit me like a punch to the gut. Because I had given our mom a key. For emergencies. Health scares. Not for unauthorized handoffs of 5 unruly children in the middle of the night. I pictured them, Mia and Chris, probably already halfway through their drive, smugly assuming I'd just roll over and let it happen. That I'd wake up to giggling and juice spills and a toddler tantrum before I even had my morning coffee. I sat down on my couch, toothbrush still in hand, staring out at the quiet skyline. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel tired. I felt clear, like something inside me had shifted. I didn't reply to the text. I called building security. Then I opened my laptop and booked a flight. I didn't pack much, just enough to get me through a few days. I didn't even turn off the lights. I left everything exactly as it was. Clean, calm, quiet. By the time Mia arrived, she was met with a locked front door, a deactivated code, and a completely empty apartment. I know, because the front desk called me, right as I was boarding. But that's not where this story ends. Not even close. Because that night set off a chain of events I never could have predicted. And what followed wasn't just about one text or one babysitting demand. It was about a family that had been taking advantage of me for years finally being told no. And the aftermath? That's where things got really messy. By the time I landed in Montreal and turned my phone back on, I had 23 texts, 3 missed calls from my mom, 2 voicemails from Mia, and a video from my cousin Lana. The video was short, grainy footage of my sister standing in the hallway outside my apartment, arms flailing as she argued with building security. Her voice was muffled, but even through the poor audio, I could hear her screaming, "He can't just disappear. I have children." The next message was a screenshot from the group chat. Mia had posted a photo of my apartment door and written, "Unbelievable. Jason abandoned his family, blocked us out of his life." I don't even know what to say. What followed was a tidal wave of family guilt. Uncle Barry weighed in with, "This is why you don't give kids without kids any responsibilities. They don't understand what it means to show up." My mom, ever the diplomat when it came to Mia, responded with, "He must have been overwhelmed. Let's not judge too harshly. But yes, Mia, I understand how hurt you are." I didn't answer any of them. I just set my phone to Do Not Disturb and spent 3 days exploring a city I'd never been to before, walking through quiet streets and sipping strong coffee in tiny cafes. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was breathing air that hadn't passed through someone else's expectations first. But when I got back home, the real fallout began. There were letters, actual handwritten letters, on my kitchen counter. My mom must have used the old emergency key. One of them was from her, long and tear-stained. It said she was disappointed in my behavior and that she hoped I could still be part of this family if I learned how to balance independence with responsibility. The second letter was from Mia's oldest daughter, Ellie. It was written in blue crayon on the back of a coloring book page. "Auntie Jason," it read, "Mommy said you don't love us anymore, and that's why you ran away." That one hurt. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, holding that crayon note in my hand, while my stomach turned. Not because I felt guilty, but because Mia had weaponized her own child to twist the narrative. To paint me not just as unreliable, but heartless. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I just changed the locks and sent a single text to my mother. "The spare key is no longer valid. Please don't come uninvited again." She didn't reply, but Mia did. Oh, did she ever? 3 days later, a package arrived. No return address, just my name on the front. Inside was a stack of invoices, school supplies, grocery receipts, a note scribbled on the back of a daycare enrollment form that read, "Since you couldn't help in person, you can help this way." I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I picked up the phone and called her. "You sent me bills?" I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I figured since you're not doing anything else for this family, the least you could do is help financially," she snapped. "You don't have kids. You live in that expensive apartment. You can afford it." "Mia, I never agreed to support you. You said no to everything else, she hissed. You've checked out, Jason. Admit it. You don't care about us. You don't care about me. No, I said quietly. I've just stopped letting you decide what I owe. There was silence. Not the kind that ends an argument, the kind that stretches and tightens like a rope. Then she said, wow. Okay, got it. I hung up. I thought that would be the end of it. I truly did. But Mia wasn't done. Because when she lost control of me, she turned her sights on someone else. 2 weeks passed without much drama. I kept my distance. I started therapy. I even joined a local rec league and made a couple new friends. For a brief moment, I thought maybe the storm had passed. Then I got a call from my cousin Lana. Have you seen Facebook? She asked, her voice tight. No, why? Go look. Mia posted something about you. It's bad. I opened the app and my heart sank. It was a photo of her kids, sitting on her living room couch with sad faces. The caption read, my brother abandoned these babies because they were inconvenient. He locked us out. Disappeared. Now they ask why Uncle Jason doesn't love them anymore. I don't have an answer. Maybe he's just too busy being important. The comments were even worse. People I hadn't seen in years were piling on. Old friends from church, distant relatives, even her in-laws. That's heartbreaking, one wrote. Some people just don't have the heart for family. Another chimed in. He always seemed cold. Now we know. I didn't know whether to scream or throw my phone through the window. Instead, I sat down and just stared at it. At the gall of it. At the utter manipulation. At the way she'd used her children, again, to paint herself as the wounded hero and me as the villain. I didn't comment. I didn't message. I just blocked her. But blocking someone on social media doesn't block the consequences. Because now the calls started coming from family friends. One of them was Aunt Clarice, who left a voicemail saying, Jason, honey, I don't know what's going on, but maybe you should think about apologizing. Those kids miss you. Even Dean called me from Texas. I get it, man, he said. I really do. But maybe just throw her a bone. A weekend or something. Just to shut her up. Throw her a bone. As if that's what I was. As if I was supposed to bend just enough to make the screaming stop. It all came to a head at my mom's birthday dinner. I wasn't going to go. I had RSVP'd no twice. But then she called me personally and said, please, just this once. No drama. Just dinner. I should have known. When I got there, the whole thing felt off. Mia was already seated at the head of the table next to Mom, chatting loudly and wearing a smile that didn't touch her eyes. Her husband was absent, as usual. Her kids were running wild, one of them already spilling lemonade on the tablecloth. I took the empty seat at the far end and tried to make small talk with Dean, who was in town for the weekend. But the tension was thick. Nobody mentioned the Facebook post. Nobody mentioned the text or the flight or the key. But it was all there, sitting in the space between each clink of silverware. Halfway through dinner, Mom stood up to give a toast. I just want to thank everyone for being here, she said, lifting her glass. It means so much that we can come together, even when we have our differences. Family is what holds us up when the world tries to push us down. She glanced at me when she said that. So did Mia. And then, I'll never forget this. Mia raised her glass too and said, to forgiveness. A few people clapped. I didn't move. But she wasn't done. Because just as dessert was being served, Mia leaned back in her chair and, loud enough for the entire table to hear, said, by the way, Jason, I gave your number to the babysitter's agency. They'll be calling you. I figured if you're not going to be a real uncle, you can at least pay like one. There was laughter. Actual laughter. As if it were a joke. I looked at my mom. She looked away. That was the moment. Not the Facebook post. Not the bills. Not even the midnight text. It was the moment I realized no one was going to stop her. That she had claimed the role of victim and martyr, and everyone else had bought in. That I could say no until I was blue in the face, but as long as she was loud enough and pitiful enough, I would always be the bad guy. That night, I went home and poured myself a drink I didn't even want. And then I opened my laptop. Not to scroll. Not to vent. To plan. Because if they wanted a villain, they were about to get one. But on my terms. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay there in the dark, the glow of my laptop screen casting long shadows on the ceiling, replaying that moment at the dinner table over and over again. Mia's smug voice, the light titter of laughter, and the way my mother looked away like it was all just too inconvenient to address. Like if she ignored the storm, maybe it wouldn't rain. I had always known Mia was manipulative, but this was the first time I felt completely cornered, not just by her, but by the people who were supposed to see me. Supposed to know I wasn't the villain in her warped narrative. But in that moment, I realized something bone deep and bitter. In my family's eyes, I had become expendable. And that understanding? It gutted me. For the first time in years, I called out of work the next day. I couldn't focus, couldn't think. I sat on the edge of my bed for hours, still wearing the same dress shirt from the night before, just numb. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ellie's crayon letter, heard my aunt's voicemail, remembered the way Mia said forgiveness like it was some kind of punchline. I thought about texting Dean, about asking him if he really meant what he said, just throw her a bone. But I didn't, because I already knew the answer. He'd been coached his whole life to keep the peace. That's what you do in our family. You keep the peace, even if it costs your sanity. But I was done keeping anything. That week, I started writing. Not emails, not work reports, journals. Long, meandering entries that started off as rants and slowly became something else. It felt ridiculous at first, sitting alone in my living room, pouring my thoughts into a leather-bound notebook like I was some moody teenager. But it helped. It helped more than I expected. I started by documenting everything Mia had done over the past year. Then the past 5. Then, eventually, my entire childhood. It was like pulling weeds out of my brain. Every lie, every manipulation, every guilt trip I'd swallowed without question, I wrote it down. I gave it form. I made it real. I started therapy around that time too. A virtual session through Works Health Portal. My therapist's name was Carlos, and he didn't sugarcoat anything. You're experiencing emotional parentification, he said after our second session. Your sister and mother have placed adult responsibilities and emotional burdens on you that aren't yours to carry. I blinked at the screen. That's the thing. It's a very real thing, he said. And it sounds like you've spent most of your life trying to be good enough for a family that only sees you as useful. That word, useful, stuck with me. Because that was exactly it. I was only as valuable as what I could provide. Time, money, labor, silence. Once I stopped providing, I stopped matching. That truth was hard to swallow. But it also became the foundation for something new. I threw myself into work, but not as a distraction. For the first time, I started setting boundaries. Not just with my family, but with my coworkers too. I turned off Slack notifications after 6 p.m. I stopped saying yes to every quick favor that landed in my inbox. I even took a risk and pitched a new product idea to my team. Something that had been rattling around in my head for months. But I'd never had the nerve to bring up because I was always too busy cleaning up after everyone else's priorities. My manager loved it. 3 weeks later, I was leading a small team to prototype it. That little win, it lit a fire in me. A small one, but steady, quiet. I stopped attending family dinners. I muted the group chat. I took long walks every morning before work, even when it rained. I listened to audiobooks on boundaries, on manipulation, on generational dysfunction. I started cooking for myself again. Real meals, not just takeout eaten in front of my laptop. One night, I pulled out an old keyboard from my closet. I hadn't touched it in years. Music had been something I loved as a teenager, before life got too loud to hear my own thoughts. I spent 2 hours that night just playing, clumsy, out of rhythm, but free. The next morning, I got a message from Ellie. Not Mia. Ellie. Hi, Uncle Jason. I miss you. Mommy says you are mad at us, but I don't think you are bad. Can we see you soon? I made a picture. There was a photo attached. It was a stick figure drawing of me holding hands with her and her little brother, both of them smiling. I stared at it for a long time. And then I cried. Not a few tears. I mean full body, chest-heaving sobs. Because I did love those kids. And I hated that Mia was using them as pawns. I hated that they were caught in the crossfire of something they didn't cause and couldn't understand. But I didn't reply. I couldn't. Not yet. Because replying meant Mia would know she still had access to me. And she didn't. Not anymore. Weeks passed. My therapist kept encouraging me to take space. Detachment, he called it. Not punishment. Not spite. Just choosing to remove myself from a system that had done more harm than good. I didn't think my mom would let it stand. I figured she'd show up again, unannounced, maybe try another let's talk ambush. But she didn't. Not right away. What I did get, however, was a certified letter. It arrived on a Tuesday. I opened it at the kitchen counter with that same sinking feeling you get when you know the envelope contains bad news. And sure enough, it was from Mia's attorney. This letter is to formally request that you begin contributing child support to the care of your niece and nephews, as you have been previously designated as an informal guardian during multiple time frames. My client seeks compensation for your recent neglect of these assumed duties. I stopped reading. Child support. Assumed duties. I almost laughed, but the kind of laugh that comes out sharp and bitter and unhinged. She had actually hired a lawyer. Not to file anything legally binding, of course. It was all bluff, all posturing. But still, she spent money on this. Just to intimidate me. That's when the anger came back. Not the hot, impulsive kind. The cold, focused kind. The kind that makes you sit very still while your brain quietly locks into place. That night, I pulled out every document I had. Every email, every voicemail, every screenshot from the past year. I organized it all into folders. I labeled everything. I even printed copies. I didn't know exactly what I'd do with them yet, but I knew I needed them. And then I did something I hadn't done in over a decade. I reached out to my father. My parents divorced when I was in college. My dad had remarried and moved to Oregon, and over the years, our relationship had faded to holiday texts and the occasional birthday card. But I knew one thing for sure. He couldn't stand Mia. I called him the next morning. "Jason," he said, confused. "Everything okay? Do you have a minute?" I told him everything. From the midnight babysitting ambush, to the social media smear campaign, to the fake child support letter. He was quiet for a long time afterward. Then he said, "She's turning into your mother." That hit me harder than I expected. He cleared his throat. "Listen, I don't have a solution. But if you ever need help, legal, financial, whatever, I've got you. Don't let them pull you back in." And I believed him. I started sleeping better after that. I stopped checking Mia's social media altogether. I deleted old voicemails. I even blocked her number. And then I started looking into something I'd never seriously considered before. Moving. Not just apartments, cities. The idea had always hovered in the back of my mind, like a fantasy. A clean break. A new place, a new life. But it never felt real. I had always stayed in Chicago because it was familiar, because it kept me close to the family I thought I needed. But now, that tie had frayed beyond repair. I applied for an internal transfer at my company. One of our satellite offices in Seattle had an opening for a team lead. It was a long shot, but I applied anyway. A week later, I got the call. I got it. And just like that, everything clicked into place. I wasn't running away. I was choosing something better. Not revenge. Not yet. Just freedom. But of course, Mia didn't know any of that. She still thought I was on the ropes. She had no idea what was coming. And I was going to make sure that when it did, she'd never see it coming. Not from the golden child's shadow. Not from the brother she thought would always say yes. But from the man who finally learned how to say no, and meant it. I gave myself a deadline, 90 days. 90 days to pack, plan, transfer, and disappear from the orbit of people who had kept me in emotional orbit for decades. But I wasn't going to leave quietly. I wasn't just going to vanish into a new zip code with a job title upgrade and a Spotify playlist called Fresh Start. No, I was going to make sure that when I left, I took back every piece of power Mia and my mother had chipped away from me, and I was going to do it methodically. It started small, quiet. I didn't tell anyone about the job offer. I didn't post a single thing online. I stopped replying in the family group chat completely, even when they tried baiting me with things like, "Jason, are you coming to Easter or should we not count on you again?" Or, "Mia's youngest is asking why you hate them." I left the messages unread. Unanswered, but I was watching. I kept quiet tabs on Mia's social media through a burner account I'd created months ago. She was ramping up the martyr act, posting filtered photos of her kids with captions like, "Solo momming it again," or "They deserve better than the people who walked away." No names, no tags, but everyone knew who she meant. The comments were a mix of sympathy and sugar-sweet validation. Her circle of enablers was alive and well. It was clear Mia had mastered the art of playing victim while building a digital pedestal out of straw and virtue signals. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd begun compiling everything. Every manipulated message, every demand, every guilt trip, every screenshot of her posts and comments. I was building a timeline, a dossier, not for legal action, necessarily, though I kept that option open, but for clarity, for proof, for me. It felt like assembling a jigsaw puzzle of my own mistreatment. And with each piece, The picture became clearer. I had been trained to bend, to absorb, to compensate for her chaos. I wasn't just the quiet brother. I was the emotional landfill for a family that couldn't take responsibility for its own dysfunction. But that wasn't all I discovered. Because during one of my weekly therapy sessions, Carlos leaned forward and said, "Have you ever considered documenting your experience publicly?" I blinked. "You mean like anonymously?" "Sure. Or not. You don't have to name names. But there's value in sharing your story. Sometimes the truth can be its own form of accountability." That planted a seed. Later that week, I started writing again. But this time, not in my journal. I opened a new Google Doc and wrote the headline: "How My Sister Tried to Turn Me into Her Free Babysitter, and What I Did Instead." It was raw, brutal, honest. I told everything. The midnight ambush, the weaponized children, the Facebook smear campaign, even the fake attorney letter. I changed names and blurred details, but the core story remained intact. I wrote it like a memoir crossed with a psychological autopsy. And when I was done, I sent it to a friend of mine who worked in media. "Just curious," I said in the email, "would something like this be publishable?" She replied 2 hours later, "This is incredible. Send me your number." We talked the next day. She didn't want names. She wanted the story, the themes, the emotional truth behind the family dynamics. "It's too common," she said. "But nobody talks about it like this. The golden child. The guilt-tripped sibling. This would kill on Medium or any big story site." I gave her permission to pitch it. She did. It got picked up by a well-known digital magazine that focused on real-life stories about toxic family relationships. I didn't use my real name. I didn't need to. Within 2 weeks of publishing, the piece had over 400,000 views. I started getting messages, emails, DMs from people saying, "This is my life, and I thought I was alone, and thank you for writing this." Some were short, others were essays. All of them were proof that I wasn't crazy or selfish or broken. I was just one of many who had spent too long playing a role someone else wrote for them. But the real shift came when Mia saw the article. I don't know exactly how she found it. Maybe someone sent it to her, or maybe one of her friends recognized the details. But I know when it happened, because my phone exploded. Missed calls, voicemails, a barrage of texts that ranged from, "How dare you air our family business?" to, "You think this makes you a hero? It makes you pathetic." I didn't reply. Then my mom called. "I can't believe you did this," she said, her voice thick with disappointment. I didn't name anyone. I replied calmly. I told my story. "You embarrassed your sister." "No," I said. "She did that herself." She hung up. That night, I sat on my balcony with a whiskey in hand and watched the city lights flicker. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not relief, exactly, but power, control, not over them, but over myself. But I still wasn't done. Because while the article was cathartic, it didn't change the fact that Mia was still toxic, still manipulating, still building her life on the backs of people she steamrolled. And now that I had real distance and real clarity, I started thinking bigger. I remembered something Mia once let slip during a family brunch a year ago, back when I was still volunteering for babysitting duty. She had mentioned how she never officially registered her side hustle, a small online boutique she ran through Instagram, selling handmade children's clothes and accessories. She bragged about skipping business taxes, how she took payments through friends and family to avoid transaction fees, and how no one needed to know how much she was making. At the time, I'd laughed awkwardly and kept eating my omelet. Now, I remembered every word, and I still had the receipts. Literally, she had used me as a shipping address for over 50 orders when her own place was flooded during a plumbing disaster. I had emails, tracking numbers, handwritten order notes, and suddenly, I realized I had leverage. Not to ruin her. I didn't want that, but to stop her, to force a ceasefire. I contacted a CPA friend, told her everything. "I'm not looking to report her," I said. "I just want to know how illegal this is." She laughed. "Technically? Very. She's likely avoided thousands in taxes. If she's using Zelle or Venmo or even PayPal and not reporting earnings, she's skating on ice that's already cracking. Could I make her aware of that?" "Absolutely," she said. "And I can even help you draft a letter. You don't have to threaten, just inform." So we did. We crafted a document with polite language and attached a full spreadsheet of Mia's likely undeclared income, estimated back taxes, and the IRS thresholds for self-employment reporting. We didn't send it to the IRS. We just printed it and mailed it to her. Certified. I waited. 3 days passed before I got the text. You think you're clever? I'm not scared of you. I didn't answer. She sent another the next day. What do you want from me? Now that was interesting. Because it wasn't a threat. It was a question. A crack. For once, she wasn't yelling. She was worried. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I wrote back, one sentence. I want you to leave me alone. She didn't reply. The next day, I got a message from my mom. No more games, Jason. This is tearing the family apart. To which I replied, maybe it needed to be. And that was it. No more texts. No more calls. No more birthday invites or Facebook pity parades. It was as if a plug had been pulled and all the noise drained out. I felt calm, not joyful, but still, clear. And in the silence, I packed. Every room, every drawer, every last corner of my apartment became a symbol of transition. I sold my couch, donated my books, sold my car. I even walked through the building one last time, saying goodbye to the doorman who used to greet me with a nod and a back from babysitting again. Huh? Nope, I said that day. Not anymore. He smiled. Good for you. I left on a Thursday morning. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not my mom. Not Mia. Not even Dean. I arrived in Seattle with 2 suitcases, 1 carry-on, and a notebook full of lessons I'd bled to learn. But I still wasn't finished. Because while I had walked away, the final chapter hadn't been written yet. And Mia? She had no idea that her story, the one she kept trying to control, was about to end very differently. I just needed the right moment. I lived quietly for the first few months in Seattle. No drama, no calls, just rainy mornings, new coworkers, and the slow, deliberate building of a life I chose for myself. My new apartment was half the size of my old one, but it faced a park where the trees turned gold in the fall, and that view was worth every square foot I'd left behind. I walked to work. I tried new restaurants. I even joined a weekly board game group at a coffee shop downtown, something I never would have done back home, where every evening felt like a hostage situation waiting to happen. It was peaceful, maybe even a little lonely sometimes, but it was mine. And then, one evening in early November, I got an email. Subject: Hi Jason, would you be open to an interview? It was from a journalist, someone who worked at the same digital magazine that had published my anonymous piece a few months earlier. She said the article had sparked huge engagement, especially from readers who had been in similar family dynamics. They were planning a follow-up series, Boundaries, Stories of the Silent Sibling. She wanted me to go on record with my real name. I didn't reply right away. I sat with it for a few days, talked it over with Carlos during therapy, asked myself what I was hoping to accomplish. Was it about revenge, vindication, or just the truth, laid bare and clean? Eventually, I said yes. The article came out 2 weeks later, and this time, I didn't hide. I gave her my name, my photo, and the full story, stripped of sugar, polished of nothing. It wasn't angry. It was measured, honest. I described the guilt, the years of invisible obligation, the emotional blackmail that had been dressed up as family duty. I detailed how Mia had ambushed me, how my mom had enabled her, how I'd finally walked away, and why. The piece went viral. It got picked up by bigger outlets, republished, quoted, even turned into a podcast segment. My inbox flooded again, but this time, not just with strangers. It started with Dean. Bro, he texted. Saw the article. Can't believe you said all that. But honestly, good for you. We talked on the phone a few days later, the first real conversation we'd had in over a year. He admitted he'd always seen the way Mia manipulated things, but he stayed quiet because it was easier. Because he lived far away. Because, as he put it, you were the one always catching the blast radius. I should have had your back sooner, he said. It's all right, I replied. You see it now. But Mia saw it too. Oh, she saw it. 3 days after the article dropped, I got a cease and desist letter in the mail. Official stationery, angry font, the whole dramatic production. Her lawyer, a different one this time, claimed I had defamed her, that I had painted her in a false light, that she'd suffered personal and professional reputational damage. I handed the letter to my new lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Clarissa I'd hired the day I agreed to go public. She smiled, read it twice, and said, let them try. They have no case. Truth is a defense, and you've got plenty of documentation. She was right. We'd been meticulous. Every claim in the article was backed up: emails, screenshots, call logs, timestamps. Clarissa drafted a firm response. No threats, just facts. We reminded them that any attempt to sue would trigger discovery, meaning everything would become public record. We never heard from them again. But Mia wasn't done. A week later, I woke up to chaos in the comments of the article. Someone, clearly her, had created several fake accounts and started posting nasty replies, calling me a liar, a coward, an emotionally abusive brother who abandoned his family. The usernames were sloppy. The grammar was unmistakably hers. The moderators banned all of them within hours. Still, I could feel the tantrum through the screen. The desperation. She was unraveling. Then came the final blow, and I didn't even deliver it. It started with a Reddit post. I wasn't the one who wrote it, but a friend sent it to me with the caption, "Is this your sister?" The post, titled, "My boss expects me to work while babysitting her kids. Is that legal?" was written by a woman who worked remotely from Mia's boutique. Apparently, Mia had hired part-time virtual assistants to handle order processing and customer emails, promising flexible hours and a family-oriented work environment. What she hadn't disclosed was that these assistants would frequently be asked to keep an eye on her kids during Zoom calls, help with homework while handling customer inquiries, or even take lunch breaks with her children over FaceTime so she could run errands. The post blew up. People were outraged. They tagged labor lawyers, employment rights subreddits, and even began sleuthing her business page. Within 2 days, Mia's boutique Instagram was flooded with angry comments. Within 4, it was taken offline entirely. A week later, she posted a tearful Facebook video. I didn't watch it. I couldn't. But Dean did. "She's saying she's being attacked by trolls," he told me. "That she's a single mom and people are trying to destroy her business. No mention of you. But it's clear she's imploding." Then came the cherry on top. Someone, I still don't know who, reported her boutique to the IRS. Probably one of the assistants. Or maybe someone from the Reddit thread. Either way, the hammer fell hard. Her shop never reopened. Her PayPal account was frozen. Her business license status changed to suspended on the state registry. She tried to pivot, started a GoFundMe with a sob story about losing her income due to online harassment. It raised $83. My mom called me a week later. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice was different. "Hello, Jason. I know things have gone too far. I don't know what to say. Mia's struggling. The kids are confused. I miss you. We all do." I listened to it twice. Then I deleted it. Because by then, I had learned something priceless. Missing someone doesn't obligate you to walk back into the fire. I never responded. Instead, I finished settling into my life in Seattle. My new role came with a team that respected boundaries, a schedule that left room for joy, and a clarity I'd never known before. I volunteered at a local nonprofit that helped mentor teenagers from broken homes, kids who, like me, had been forced to play adult too soon. One afternoon, while cleaning out old files on my laptop, I stumbled across the original folder I'd titled The Mia Problem. Inside were hundreds of screenshots, voice memos, emails, a digital graveyard of manipulation. I didn't need them anymore. I deleted the entire folder. Not out of forgiveness, out of peace. Because the revenge? It wasn't the article. It wasn't the tax scare. It wasn't the boutique collapsing under its own dishonesty. The revenge was the silence, the distance, the life rebuilt. Mia had spent years trying to paint me as bitter, cold, selfish. But in the end, she wasn't left with a villain. She was left with her own reflection. And me? I was finally free. I used to think walking away was weakness. Now I know it's the strongest thing I've ever done.